different ways of gaining control. Right, and the amount of money you need is, say, what's around 12, 8 million? 8 million, good. So that brings us to 20 million. Hooray. Okay, so you're quite happy? Yeah? Secure. So 20 million is now. So everybody signed their contracts into the computer, 20 million, it's all gone out. Okay? So that everybody owes the bank 20 million, even though the bank didn't have 20 million to lend. Now here's the central question, here's the central point. Creates a system of perpetual growth. What's the principal amount that has been lent? 20 million. What's the actual amount that is owed?
It's always increasing.
It's always increasing, right? But let's say it's over a fixed 10-year term of 5% per annum. Can somebody do the count? So we won't do it compound, it's just 5% of the principal, so I think it's about 50%. That's what it is, isn't it, over 10 years? Come on, guys. These are the brightest minds in this country. So you've got 20 million, and then you've got 10 million on top. Right, now here's the question. Okay, 20 million is the principal. That's gone out into society. 30 million is owed. Where does that 10 million come from? Yes.
The new debt is created.
Exactly right. You see, the money, the physical money isn't there. 20 million is what's gone out. 30 million is what's owed. So 10 million needs to come from somewhere. If you say, well, there's money already in society, yeah, that's already debt. Who isn't in debt? Is Oxford University in debt? Yes, it is. Is the government in debt? Yes, it is. You and I in debt? Yes, we are. Other countries in debt? Yes, there is. Yes, they are. So, if that's all debt, then we need new debt. Perpetual growth. Is a system of perpetual growth sustainable? It's an oxymoron, right? You can't have something which continuously grows. At some point, it will stop.
What is if you create new markets?
Okay? That's the goal, isn't it? That's why globalization is so important. Because you need new markets. But ultimately, that cycle will come to an end, won't it? Possibly. Yes?
Well, I mean, theoretically, the bank is helping us to create these businesses, which are going to create value, wealth generation, and part of that value we're going to give back to the bank in terms of interest. That's what the theory is. But if our businesses fail, then that's a different story. If they fail, that means then we still have to give them 30 million, regardless of whether we've gone into a loss.
So you began by being okay with banking, and now that last point makes it not okay? Okay, I can agree with that to an extent.
Well, I mean, theoretically, if all the investment the banks do are in profitable businesses, and those businesses are actually creating value for the public, that means then there is economic growth in real terms.
I'd really like to get into this. We'll do it in the question and answer, if that's okay, just to keep the continuity. Right, inflation. Are we doing for time?
50 minutes.
Oh, cool. Right. Excuse me for reading. Where's it gone? Right. Inflation. Interest. Is it positive or negative in terms of its effect on inflation? Well, it can be either or, and this example kind of exemplifies some of the negative. The theory states, and by the way, this is interesting because inflation is linked to the interest-bearing system. Inflation is what? The increase in the average price of certain items per annum. Actually, that's the way economists put it. It's actually the influx of money into society that devalues the old money. That's a better way of looking at it. Yeah? So the reason why my £5 when I was growing up would buy... That will reveal how old I am. Would buy a lot more than the actual £5 would do now. That's because there's more £5 in circulation, which devalues the other £5. So that's inflation. The theory says that if prices are rising too much, i.e. inflation, the solution is simple: raise interest rates. We spend less, and as demand falls, prices fall, or don't increase. But life isn't that simple. Raising interest rates also makes putting money in British banks attractive to the world's financial speculators if the interest rates in the UK are higher than elsewhere. The pound becomes a good buy, demand for sterling increases, and up goes the value of the pound vis-a-vis other currencies. This is a strong pound. A strong pound does two things to the domestic economy. It makes imports cheaper and it makes exports more expensive. As a result, there is less demand for things made in Britain, and ultimately businesses cut back or close. Unemployment rises, the unemployed have greatly reduced incomes, and so demand in the economy falls and prices fall. Inflation can control inflation. Interest can control inflation, but it can have adverse effects. Okay, contemporary perspective. We're not going to go through all of these, we really don't have the time, but there are some real luminaries. Yeah, not crackpots like me who roam around universities hoping people will listen to him. We're talking about Thomas Jefferson, former US President, Abraham Lincoln, Jesse Jackson. We're talking about people like Aristotle. That's your philosophical reference. Thomas Aquinas. You're talking about people like Henry Ford. Who else have we got here? Lincoln Madrid. John Adams in 1787. Again, I'd love to read all of these out. Lord Acton, Lord Chief Justice of England in 1875. I mean, he simply said that the issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner rather than later is people versus the banks. You've got Andrew Jackson. And these guys were really staunchly against the use of interest in society and the fact that governments no longer control the flow of credit, that this industry became privatized. And there's only one of these quotes, I think it's this one by Thomas Edison, that I'll read, which really does hammer the point home. People who will not turn a shovel, and this relates to, actually, you made that comment about bank providing a service, etc. People who will not turn a shovel full of dirt on the project nor contribute a pound of material will collect more money from the United States than will the people who supply all the material and do all the work. This is the terrible thing about interest. In all great bond issues, the interest is always greater than the principal. All the great public works cost more than twice as much on that account. Under the present system of doing business, we simply add from 120 to 150% of the stated cost. But here is the point. If our nation can issue a dollar bond, it is capable of issuing a dollar bill. The element that makes the bond good makes the bill good also. The difference between the bond and the bill is that the bond lets money brokers collect twice the amount of the bond and an additional 20%, whereas the currency, the honest sort provided by the Constitution, pays nobody but those who contribute in some useful way. It is absurd to say our country can issue bonds and cannot issue currency. Both are promises to pay, but one fattens the usurer and the other helps the people. If the currency issued to the people were no good, then the bonds would be no good. I think that's pretty powerful. That summarizes the points about interest. And the Rothschilds are a family who are basically the fathers of modern banking. Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. Yeah, says it all. Right. So most of you are probably thinking there's going to be more religion in this particular presentation. And there is a bit. I think it's no secret that Islamic finance, in terms of its principles, is gaining further momentum in the market. I myself have formerly worked with a private financial services organisation that promoted Islamic financial products. And pretty much what we're talking about here are principles which are embodied within the Islamic faith and have been previously embodied by the Judaic faith, by the Christian faith, by the Hindu faith, and by secular philosophers as well. The only point here is that at this moment in time, the only ideology as such holding a flag in this regard is the Islamic faith, and that's just the plain truth of it. But even then, there are compromises being made, but we'll have to talk about that. So these are some verses from the Quran that mention the explicit ban of usury on money. The Bible, again in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Exodus, there are clear stipulations saying that you shouldn't lend. When you had the Renaissance and there was a separation of church and state,